Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Lorrie Gray.
And I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And today we are attempting to discuss
Chapter 16
of A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Take 3.
Take 3, at least. Guys, we've had technical difficulties. So we are trying to redo this again.
Do our best.
We are. But it's fun no matter what.
It is.
I'm thinking back, I'm like, we said so much fun stuff in those first couple episodes, but it feels weird to like say it again because then it feels scripted. It's like you can't say a joke and then like re-say a joke because then it's not
this
funny.
is the part when I said that really funny thing.
Yeah, let's try that again.
Yeah, we won't do that. Don't worry.
Oh, impromptu stuff. So if you're like, I was gonna say, if there's stuff where you're like, guys, that was an obvious thing that you missed, it's because we talked about it 2 episodes ago or 2 attempts ago, and then we just couldn't bring ourselves to talk about it again. But yes, okay, chapter 16.
Chapter 16. So
for
we
real.
Finished 15.
Yes.
Was the Suriel and the Naga.
Yeah.
Well, 15 may have been just the Naga. I don't even remember at this point. And then we have Feyre with the, I wanted to tell him how much that meant that the High Lord of the Spring Court thought I was worth saving. We've had that. And now chapter 16, my favorite part. After soaking in the bath for nearly an hour, I found myself sitting in a low-backed chair before my room's roaring fireplace, savoring the feel of Alice brushing out my damp hair. Though dinner was to be served soon, Alice had a cup of molten chocolate brought up and refused to do anything until I'd had a few sips. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. I drank from the thick mug as she brushed my hair, nearly purring at the feel of her thin fingers along my scalp. I love self-care. So
Self-care.
good. And I love chocolate. And I love fires. And I love baths. And I've never had an hour-long bath, but that sounds really nice.
Hair brushing.
And I'll mention it's not a joke. It wasn't funny the first time, but the fact that she's able to stay in the bath for an hour, fairy magic. Fairy magic keeping that bathtub hot is really good. So nice.
Oh my
goodness. I want to try that the fairy molten chocolate. So bad. Oh my gosh.
Baths.
There are some fanfics that have Cereal Tea Company, like the T-shirts. You can buy Cereal Tea Company, which is a thing.
Is there really?
Among ACOTAR fans. So I'm thinking I want to go to that Cereal Tea Company little shop somewhere in the world and have this molten chocolate. I'm sure you can order it there.
Oh my goodness.
That'd be nice.
That would be so nice. Man, long baths though. I mean, I don't think a lot, like bubble baths are like this cliche thing. But I'm like, how many people actually do that? I actually do though, because I would do like Epsom salt, like detox baths where you have to stay in there for like 40 minutes and then like scrub your skin down and stuff. And they are relaxing, but it was always also a little like medical.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you're having to do it,
you kind of have to do it.
Slightly less romantic, slightly less fairy-like.
I remember. Oh my gosh, I've told this story so many times. If anybody's hung out with me, like they're like, "Oh my gosh, again." But like when I first started trying to understand like what self-care was, I really in my mind it was like it was you go get a massage or you take a bubble bath. I think I just didn't, I wasn't around people who used that language, who talked about that. And this was kind of, moving towards, just doing kind things for yourself. And I couldn't wrap my head around it being anything outside of that, or pedicures, right? Like a massage, a mani-pedi, or a bubble bath. And at the time I'm like, well, I can't afford a massage.
No. I don't have the time or the money for self-care.
For mani-pedis. But I was like, okay, I'll try this like bath thing. And I'm trying to recreate what I saw in movies, right? So it's like warm bath, like bubbles, you light a candle and you sit and read a book. Like that's always the cliche thing in a movie. And I remember trying it and I'm like, this is awful. I don't like this. Like my hands are wet. I'm getting my book wet. I'm afraid I'm going to drop my book. My arms being out of the water, like feel cold. The bath water is getting cold because there's not fairy magic. And I'm like, it was like I was trying really hard to recreate this thing that wasn't actually working for me. And at the time I had sort of like well, fine, I just can't do self-care.
Yeah, exactly. Can't do it. That's self-care and I can't do it. So I'm out. I'm going to not do this self-care thing.
I was very happy to learn that was not what that is or how that works. I'm very much in the chocolate is self-care category here with Feyre and Alice.
100, yes, molten chocolate. I have time for that.
I have time for that. I have time for a chocolate moment for all the things. Anyways, yes, I love this little moment in the midst of, and we were talking about this too, guys, for the podcast, where the first chunk of this book is a little hard.
Yeah.
And it's a little dark. And if you listen to the other episodes, that's part of why we wanted to do this series, because we get to start with our character in a darker place. And so many of us are in a darker place because she was the type of character, and this is the type of story where you can jump on board and travel through it. But we also had moments of like, these early chapters aren't very fun.
Not fun.
So we're starting to get into this place. And I think there's something to be said for, as she's moving out of this place of survival into a place of thriving, that we have this beautiful self-care scene.
Yeah.
That we're not in the, and there's no mention here of like, where's the nearest exit? Like she's not doing,
She's relaxing.
she's actually finally relaxing. She's starting to recognize things are safe. It's a good transition. Yeah, but we're excited, guys, for the next upcoming chapters as things start to get a little more fun and interesting and
about to
exciting.
get real fun.
Okay.
And we learn that Alice has a family here, which Feyre had just conveniently assumed that she didn't, but she has nephews she cares about.
Yeah, just a nice little side note there of how helpful it is to ask a question and not make an assumption about things.
Yeah.
But we all do it sometimes.
Yeah. If you had a family, maybe you'd understand. Oh, I do.
I actually do. It's like, that is interesting. I think you and I, Amanda and I, got to have a bunch of hours in the car together the other day. We drove across town for a friend's birthday. We were definitely in the car more than we were at the birthday, but it was 1,000% worth it. But we got to have a lot of like conversations, and it's so interesting to see, like, I love getting to hear people's stories and kind of like their origin stories. And I think there were even things that came up in our conversation where I'm like, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. How do we not know these things
How
about
do we
each
not
other?
know these
Basic
things? But it changes stuff, like where once you, like, when you start to hear like all the context and the stories and the way that sort of changes the way that you view a person is really interesting. Which, by the way, there's another one I want to come back to right here, but I'm going to skip ahead for a minute. Oh gosh, no, I can't skip ahead. It's going to mess it up. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll just go into the next thing. That related to the next thought, where the next thing that she learns about is that she was wrong about this whole fairies can't
tell a
lie.
Actually, we can. We do all the time.
Actually, we can.
We find lying to be an art. And we lied when we told those ancient mortals that we couldn't speak an untruth. How else would we get them to trust us and do our bidding? And then instantly Feyre goes into, oh my gosh, and now she's replaying every conversation she's ever had.
Replaying everything.
Wait, what?
That part like stopped me. I spent a lot of time after I read that like thinking about, like, I've had those moments where I thought I understood a person or a situation or something, whatever it is. Like, I just thought that I understood how it worked. And then you get more information, and that place of going back and trying to refilter everything out. I was thinking about, there's a relationship in my life. I'm not going to be specific. Those are the kinds of things you guys can come join our groups for, where we get real vulnerable. We're just not doing that on the big public podcast, but a relationship in my life where there was a person, and they, how do I say this? Anytime I was around them, they were going all the time. And like the way that it felt to me was a little bit superior, right? Like, I'm a little superior to you, and like resting's beneath me, and like we all need to be active all the time. Constantly need to be doing something. There was never a lot of like relaxing or just spending time being. And it all came across to me very judgmental, almost like, this is how we're supposed to be and you're not doing it right. And I had created this understanding of the person's behavior based on what I had viewed, right? And then in my mind, that just became the truth. Like, that's just how this person is, right? Like, this is just who they are. This is just what they are. And then there was a conversation, and it was really, really a very vulnerable conversation where they shared some things from their past. And I had one of those shifts where I realized, oh my goodness, this person is like deeply wounded and does not believe that they are enough. And the reason that they are never sitting still is because they are, one, incredibly anxious, and two, very busy trying to prove that they deserve to take up space in the world.
Yeah.
It's like, why do they constantly have to be doing stuff? Because they don't believe that they're enough being right where they are. And I remember having a moment like this where I went back and I was like thinking about, and my mind was going back to like the first time I'd met them. Okay, and then that visit, and then that time, and this time, and all those times where I had viewed their behavior through a certain lens and it made sense. And then with this new information, I was like, oh, okay, that one changed, that one changed, that one changed, that one changed. And like, it's like this domino effect all through like our past history where everything just made sense. Honestly, it made a lot more sense. And there was like so much more compassion. I think that happens a lot, and we're always kind of having to take what we know and make an assessment. And gosh, I've been wrong a lot.
Gosh, that sucks. Gosh, I hate being wrong.
But I am, and it's been interesting to accept that like we're always. It's a human thing, right? That like brains are going to do that. It's gonna try to create understanding, and like that the brain wants to take information and categorize it. There's a bunch of this stuff of me starting to understand. It's like, it's just what human brains do. It's not bad. But the balance between, okay, my brain is going to push to try to put all of this in a neat category so it can make sense of a lot of information. And can I hold that also with the truth of there's a lot of stuff that I don't know. There's so much context. And to always hold that understanding in my awareness and to ask more questions. Anyways, but as soon as I read that, I'm like, oh, I've experienced that. Trying to go back and relook at everything. Oh my gosh, though. But this whole thing, learning that they can lie is huge. But the other thing, this idea of part of the reason that she questioned it was because they said that she looked lovely. They're like, you look lovely. And she's like, I snorted. I never looked lovely.
Can lie.
I never looked lovely a day in my life. But in her mind, she's like, well, they must be telling the truth.
Yeah.
But she questioned it, and it's the only reason that she said it. Oh, Feyre, I'm sure you look lovely a day in your life.
Not in her eyes.
She didn't think so. So this shifts a lot.
Yes.
She's trying to wrap her head around that. So now she knows that this is a possibility, and that's going to change things. All right, what else do we have here?
We've got Tamlin's amusement and a little bit of like, wow, you actually snared the cereal. A human girl.
I love this. Was it supposed to be hard?
Yeah. It's supposed to be hard or something?
I love getting to see these like little bits of her attitude coming out as she gets more comfortable with them and speaking up.
Just getting
which
very comfortable.
Which, by the way, is a bit of bravado, though, because
for sure.
when it was actually happening, her thought was, she was like, Lucien overestimated my abilities here, because she had one of those like, holy shit moments. Like, I don't think I can do this without dying. Yeah. What are we doing?
And she almost didn't.
And she almost didn't make it, and then she almost got eaten by the Naga. And now she's like, supposed to be hard?
Oh. Just a light day, whatevering for Feyre.
Oh, a little bit of bravado there, but sometimes we need that. Gosh, this chapter is full of so much conversation that's just revealing. I feel like I want to just like stop in every single moment. Okay, but this shifts into a conversation that's much, much, much more uncomfortable for her. And the whole next like half of this page and the next page, I feel like there's so much there where he pulls out the word list that he found, and he's reading them off. Unusual, Q, slaying. I don't even know if I can say that word. Conflagration. How do you say that?
Conflagration.
Okay, that's one of those words that like you read.
Why she picked that one? Like this seems like a word I need to know. Conflagration.
Well, again, she's just like, that's a word I don't know. How do I figure it out? If you don't know what it is, it could be anything. And so he read it out. He read the list. I wanted to curl up and die. These are these words I couldn't recognize from the books. Words that now seem so simple, so absurdly easy, as he was saying them aloud. I love it. He's like, is this a poem about murdering me and then burning my body? He's trying to make light, and she is just so deeply embarrassed. And she talks about like my throat closed up, and oh my gosh, I get that so much. Do you get that? Like does your throat close up when you're in
Oh, I
stressful
don't know.
situations?
Watch for that.
It does. It
Sounds
does for
familiar.
me. Okay, now you know more about this than me. Okay, this is a tangent. We didn't talk about this last time, but so when people are experiencing like high stress or trauma responses or shame or different things, one of the things we do for somatic work is trying to figure out like where do you feel it in your body, and it's different for a lot of people. But the two places that I always feel it the most strongly, like one is in my throat where I feel like my throat is closing up, and the other is solar plexus. And I remember having a day of being like, aren't those the seats of like two different like chakra kind of things? And that's not a thing that I've studied. Like it's one of those things where somebody shows a chart, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like that's fun. It's just not been a way of looking at the world that I've ever heavily connected with. I just had sort of a loose understanding of like, okay, that's a thing, and that possibly makes sense, but not like deep dive study. But I went to look at like what those centers represented in the body, and a lot of things, but one being, throat being connected to voice.
Yeah.
And I think the solar plexus area was connected to like self-esteem,
Yeah. It's your personal power.
personal power. And as I was thinking about what my particular brand of trauma looks like, it's connected to both of those things so strongly. And I'll notice like which one is triggered is usually very much related to what's happening. Because sometimes I feel it one place and not the other, and sometimes I feel it both, depending on what's happening. But when there's a space where I don't feel safe to say what's true, if there's a space where I feel gaslit, or I feel like there's an abuse of power where like saying what's actually true to me would be unsafe to me, my throat closes up.
I'm gonna have to watch for that because I feel the sore throat thing when I'm dealing with similar situations, where it's like I know, okay, yep, this is another place where I'm not expressing myself fully, or I'm not.
Yes.
I can't say what I want to say.
Yeah. And I'm curious, for anybody listening, if anybody relates to that, whether or not you know a lot about chakras or not, but when I'm having, when it's like I am not feeling the freedom, it doesn't feel, I guess I would say, like, if I don't actually feel safe in that moment to say what's actually true for me or show up all the way, I'll feel it. I'll feel it in my throat, which I thought was really fascinating. So I'm like, yes, the throat closing up. And then also this like clenching the hands into fists, which she was saying like to keep from hiding my face behind them, which sometimes I think of like clenching hands as being like there's like a bit of a fight response, but this was her wanting to hide. And I just resonate with that sensation so much. And she is like, get me out of here. Yeah. She's saying goodnight and just trying to get out of there because she's hurting so bad, and she's so embarrassed, and she just doesn't have, I think, the ability to. Anyways, I have a lot of compassion here too, because I think that this idea of like, oh, okay, well then say what's true, we'll stand up, we'll do that thing. I'm like, sometimes we're just not ready. Like, and the idea of giving ourselves some space and just getting out of a situation that's incredibly uncomfortable, like I sometimes feel like that's the most loving thing I can do for myself. And she recognized she needed to.
No.
But instead,
he's not ready to let her go. He wants to chat about her family and how they didn't appreciate her enough, and how they didn't recognize how much she did for them.
But I feel this is another one of those like, this is a good Tamlin moment for me here.
For sure.
This whole next section where, he seems like he's really like paying attention. He seems like he's genuinely curious, and that he's reading the situation pretty well, and that he's really trying. Like he's putting forth some effort here, and she's the one that's just like, just leave me alone. Just leave me alone.
I don't need your help.
And he can see it, and he's like, I'm not insulting you. Yeah. She's like, I don't need your help. And this, oh my gosh, it was so uncomfortable to watch, like him being in such a good space and her not being able to receive it. She's like, no. It's awful. It's embarrassing. Here's my wall. Don't try to get through it. this is like the only way that I've kept myself safe. And here's a person like who's really giving her all the things I think she deeply needs and wants, and she's just not in a space where she feels safe enough to receive it. Leading to one, him recognizing, him kind of looking at her family and really, I think, and I don't know if she's ever considered this, but like him sort of presenting to her like this was on them, like they're fools, like,
Yeah.
and I think so many of us, it's always about us, like to have somebody outside of us be like, this was about them, this was about their inability to see this thing, as opposed to something with you. Oh my gosh, which ends on the, do you even know how to laugh?
How to laugh?
Oh. No,
Not yet.
not yet. Not
coming.
yet. I don't want your pity. And he says, what about a friend?
Yeah. I love that moment. And his jade eyes were so bright I couldn't look away. What about a friend? Ah, that's nice.
So we see this genuineness. It doesn't seem, like a manipulation, which then leads into more information here about, her asking, well, can fairies and be friends with mortals? And he talks about, well, 500 years ago, enough fairies were friends with mortals that they went to war on their behalf. It's like, what?
No.
I'd never heard that before. That hadn't been in the mural. And this, I think creates such a deeper conversation with what came up in some of those first chapters where we saw so many things of like, we've been taught this since birth. Like these are the songs taught in cradles. This is everybody, everybody knows this. This is just how it is. Everybody knows these things. And more layers coming back of that what she believed to be true was not the whole story. It wasn't all the information. And I was like, time and time again, she's having to reconcile what she was taught her entire life with the reality that's being presented to her.
Yeah.
I think she handles it pretty well, but it's unsettling.
Definitely unsettling. Bless her heart. Oh, it sucks. You've just been told lies your whole life. But well-meaning, because there are fairies that she does need to be afraid of, which she's faced some of them now. So she knows it's like, oh, okay, maybe there's just this huge generalization happening that all fairies are bad.
Right? That's an interesting thing. Like I've been talking a lot about some of those cognitive distortions, like overgeneralization, and some of my other coaching things, and how we do this. Yeah, I'm like, and I wonder about the reason for that. And I'm always curious, like when I look at parents who teach their kids certain things, and sometimes they teach them things that are inaccurate. Sometimes I think it does come from a good place. It's like, oh, it's like the only way that they're going to get it is if it's this like black or white thing.
Yeah.
And maybe like when kids are 2
2 to 4.
But, with my kids, I'm like, I think I've always had a sense of, I'm like, I think that kids are able to process a lot more sometimes than they're given credit for. I don't know, and we've always done our best to give our kids as much of the full story as is appropriate for their age. I mean, sometimes there's stuff where I'm like, you need to wait till you're a little older for like all the information on that. But I have this belief, because I think back to myself, I'm like, I remember having deep thoughts whenever I was 9, 10, and having situations where I would ask questions and I was given half answers. I was given answers like, because I said so.
Oh, my favorite.
Oh
answer.
my gosh.
My dad was so good at that one.
Because I said so. Yeah. And I'm like, and I'm over here with confusion and questions and thinking deeply about the world, and like not being given information and kind of being told that I'm not able to handle the information. And with my kids, I've had sort of this belief of, I'm like, I think that for my kids, if I give them the accurate truth, which a lot of times is gray, it's shades of gray. Yeah. A lot of times there's a lot of paradox that I think is true of our world. I'm like, I've just had a belief, I think that they can handle that. And for the most part, I think that they have. I think even at 10, at 12, at 14, that they've been able to understand that life is nuanced and they've done okay with it.
So important.
Yeah.
It's so important not to raise kids to think that the world is black and white, because they're going to be so completely blown away and have the rug yanked out from under them when they realize it's not black and white. Oh crap, this is
Right.
way harder than just making things black and white, which is, it does simplify it. I can see, I mean, I've definitely wanted to say because I said so a lot of times
Oh my
with having
gosh,
4 kids.
right? Well,
Oh my gosh.
and I think it's that like momentary comfort versus like long-term well-being that shows up like across life. It's that same principle where, yeah, it does feel like it simplifies it in the moment because it can end the conversation. And if you can separate it into good, bad, right, wrong, black, white, you get that temporary comfort of feeling like things are clear. But
Yeah.
then when you think about what you give up for that,
Yeah.
and I think actually in the long term, it makes life so like the attempt to oversimplify into clear categories of black and white actually makes life so much more complicated and so much more painful. Because if a situation is complex, it just needs to be allowed to be complex.
Yeah.
And I get the attempt. I do. Like I get the mindset, and even as a parent, like wanting to simplify things. And but I don't know. I think some of that comes from this false belief that like as parents, it's our job to protect our kids from pain. And I just don't believe that's my job. I'm like, I think that my job is to help them understand how to deal with pain and how to walk through that well and how to walk through discomfort well and to help them learn to self-regulate through uncomfortable emotions, not to avoid them.
No, better get used to them now, kiddo. There's a lot more where that came from.
Welcome to humanity. Welcome to humanity. But yeah, so she's getting this information now. She's getting this true story. She keeps having these moments of having to. I feel like the rug just keeps getting pulled out from underneath her.
No.
But what I'll say with that, kind of last thing on that is you can see it's uncomfortable and unsettling in the moment. And it's really easy to empathize with how unsettling that is in the moment. But each time she has one of those things, she gets closer to what's actually true.
Yeah.
Like, and I would rather have truth that's complicated and messy,
Hell yeah.
right? Than like this simplified version that isn't actually accurate. I'm like, but it's actually, and I think that's the thing, like for myself, I'm like, we can handle this. Like as humans, like we're able to handle complex emotions. And I can look at things and be like, yeah, that's just like a clusterfuck of things. And like, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And I think I find more peace in just saying what's true than trying to make it all fit into a category. If I'm just like, oh, it's totally a mess, and that's how it's supposed to be. Okay.
That we can do.
I can settle into that. And I think that she can too. And she gets to keep doing this. She gets to keep doing this throughout her story. Okay. So next big thing is...
Yeah, you're doing the same thing. So
yeah, is that what you marked?
Find out that he's changed her family's memories. He's altered their memories. So they know she's safe. They have no memory of a beast bursting into their cottage and think that a long-lost, very wealthy aunt called her away to aid on her deathbed. They know you're alive and fed and cared for. And they also know that there have been rumors of a threat in Prithian and are prepared to run should any of the warning signs about the wall faltering occur. So now all of this hard work that she's been doing to escape and to write this letter and all of this, none of it needed to happen. Thank you, Tamlin, for not telling her that in the very beginning and avoiding all of those
right. I know. That was when we talked about in the first episode. There's a number of things where I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about that again. Okay.
Yeah.
But this one, I'm like, anything that I'm ranty about, I'm like, I will talk about that a lot of times. 'Cause I'm like, really? You could just... why didn't we just tell her all of this like day one? Like maybe, like that ride from her cottage
2 days when you had her sleeping.
And like we didn't tell it, like maybe if during that ride we'd explained some different things, like this is where we're going. This is what you can expect. Do you have questions about fairies? Hey, like, by the way, this is what your family thinks. Like if she'd walked into this with all that information, which again,
in his defense, she had just murdered one of his
She had just murdered his friend. He's got a lot of stuff going on. Yes, compassion that he was having
She
his
was
own
very angry.
moment. But I do feel like there
Go
were,
to sleep.
so maybe not day one, but like
Somewhere in there, yeah.
two
There
or
was
three.
definitely
Like there
well,
was.
well, when you can see that she's consistently trying to escape, that would be like, why is she always trying to escape when I'm providing this beautiful life for her? Oh, it's because she's worried about her. You know, she's worried about her family. You're talking up
Oh my gosh.
how much she loves them, and yet you haven't told her yet
Yes.
that they're okay. They're not worried about her because he's glamored
He's
their
done all
minds.
this stuff. Yeah, it's so huge. Okay, so this though, there was an interesting thing in here that they don't really explain, but he lets her know that he's veiled them, or veiled their memories, so that they wouldn't come, so that they wouldn't come after you. Because he said, he's like, I was afraid your father might come after you, or persuade some villagers to cross the wall with him and further violate the treaty. And what she says is, you don't know him. My father wouldn't have bothered to do either. Tamlin looked at me for a long moment. Yes, he would have. Okay, now this, they don't explain. I'm like,
Like why Tamlin thinks that he knows her dad better than she does.
well, because that's my question. I'm like, is this him? So I'm like, okay, is this Tamlin looking at her and actually starting to see her as valuable and projecting what fathers do onto the situation? Or is this one of those things where, like, if he can go in and glamour memories, does that mean that he looked inside his head and actually knows something that we don't know, and actually saw that, like, did he need to glamour the memories in this way because, like, did he peek inside his head and get the sense that, like, that he could see the determination to come after her was planted in there? Like, was that part of it? And is this,
I guess we'll never know. I don't think Tamlin can do that, though.
You don't think so?
Given what I've seen so far. I haven't finished the series, but I don't think Tamlin can do that.
yeah.
And I don't think her dad would have. Like him, I think he's probably right.
So you
I
think,
don't
so you
know if
think
he would have.
this, so you think this is just him, like, making an assumption or trying to make her feel better here?
Yeah, that's my take.
Maybe.
Or just being like every dad, like, yeah, just making that assumption. Like, you're a great girl. Your dad seemed like he liked you. He would have. He would have. I had to do it.
Yeah, I'm curious, but that thing, I was like, anyways, I still don't know.
Hopefully someday we'll meet Tamlin and we can ask him.
We can ask him.
Tam.
Yeah, because she's like, no, he wouldn't have twisted knee. Not, that this has been his excuse. Like, he would never do this. Anyway, but I thought that was really interesting. I think I'd like to think that, I think when I read this, like, I sort of wanted to believe that Tamlin knew something here, and this was one of those places where Feyre's thoughts about, again, that it's more of that distortion of, like, her perception. Because again, we had that moment calling back to her dad saying, like, you were always too good for here.
Yeah.
And even though he was saying, like, run away, don't come back, it felt to me like a callback to that space of the way that she understands her relationship with her dad, the way that she understands the way her family perceives her is not necessarily accurate.
Yeah. That's definitely a good point. Yeah.
So I don't know.
There does definitely
And so, I
a
mean,
fair amount of that.
and and that could have simply, and that's the thing, like, maybe this has nothing to do with his abilities to look at memories, but maybe this was just simply him being able to see the situation more clearly. Now, all we get, though, is Feyre's thoughts. Like, we're listening to this through her mind. And so when she makes this case of, like, because we see her family in the first chapter through her eyes, we're only getting her take on them. We're getting her understanding of their relationships and who they are and why they do what they do and what her father is and isn't capable of. And I do wonder if there's even just a space here of, like, an outside person looking at it is actually seeing it more accurate than her, because she's viewed the relationship through her lenses for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, we know her lenses are skewed, so that's definitely very possible.
Anyway, such a good one. Oh, but then this leads down to this thing when she's realized this, which one I love that she points out, like, such fairy arrogance here to this is like a violation, and how dare they do that? And she recognizes that, and she has this moment of realizing that, like, her vow is genuinely fulfilled at this point, her task complete. And
What's left for me?
Yeah, and
Jeez, I'm
she's
nobody now. That vow was all I had in life, and now that's all taken care of, and there's just a big void.
But this was, what I liked about this. So it feels sort of repetitive. I'm like, oh my goodness, how many times so we're in chapter 16 right now. How many times just even on this podcast, and we probably didn't draw attention to all of them, her relationship with this vow. Like we've probably brought this up
yeah.
in the podcast 4 times. There were probably twice that many references to this where we see where we're talking about different aspects of how her having this vow to her family impacts her life. And I think this is maybe the third time that there was a realization of my vow was fulfilled. And each time she's had a different thing, she's like, okay, my vow was fulfilled. And then it was like, okay, my vow was really fulfilled. And now she was like, okay, now my vow is really fulfilled. And she keeps having a different layer of what that looks like.
So true.
But this is the first time that it was enough that she then shifts to living differently. And there's something, I don't know, I was just thinking about that, like the way I explain it to my clients, I'm like, so much of this is layers. Like a lot of people, again, back to the black and white, like either I'm struggling with this concept or I'm like not, either I'm here or I'm there. But most things, we visit something in a layer and then we visit it in another layer and we visit it in another layer. And there's always a deepening. And I think when people look at it in black and white, or they go through something and it's like, oh, okay, I went through this season of really working on this thing. Whew, so glad I'm out the other side. And then 6 months later or a year later, they're visiting it again and they'll go to this place of like, I thought I dealt with this already.
Yeah.
I thought I was
I hate
done.
that feeling.
But
I feel it. I'm there with you.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
struggling with that.
And when I realized, I'm like, oh, no, it's not. Because I think it's the interpretation of like the work that I did before wasn't real or it didn't count.
Yeah.
But just the understanding that we hit things in layers. And it's like, no, that was all real and you really did it and you got to that place. And this is a deeper freedom.
Yeah.
And it's always going to need to be that, because if it was all revealed at one time, we probably couldn't handle it. But you see different shifts. But this is the first time where once she went to like, okay, but like really, really truly fulfilled,
my
not
task
just
is
like
complete.
little
What was left
bit.
for me, and then she instantly starts noticing the firelight dancing on his mask, warming the gold, setting the emerald, such color and variation. That's instantly where her brain goes. She starts noticing color and variation, and the artist in her starts to immediately emerge as soon as the pressure of that vow is lifted.
Yeah, she's able to connect with what she wants once she really reached this level. And I will say, like, I don't think this is the full, like, as far as she's going to go with this, but she hit a different level here where she was actually finally able to connect with what she wanted in a real way. And so she asks for paint.
She just, and he hasn't even, I love that. I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, did he just ask her what? Nope. He hasn't asked her in days, but she's just suddenly like, paint.
It just comes out of nowhere. She's like, I get it. I can
to
ask for it now. And she's ready for this. Now, after a bunch of pages of like, yay, pro Tamlin moments where he did some good stuff, he definitely ticks me off here, where she's offering to help around the kitchen or the garden to pay for it. And he says, you'd be more of a hindrance.
Thanks, Tam.
Thanks, Tam. And like I said, and this was one of those places where, again, I like the way this character is written, because it's not like she has this like moment and now like everything is fixed, because she had this like breakthrough of being able to ask for what she wanted, but then somebody says like, you would be a hindrance helping around the house, and she didn't challenge that.
No, that's what I love. She just like, she goes,
like,
because that's just
okay.
her inner voice. That's just fact. Though.
She's like,
And
you're right.
I already know that. So her response to this is, thank you. I mean,
Truly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's just
like,
excited the paints are coming.
because when you believe like you're a stupid, ignorant human around these like cultured high fae, like of course, but I'm like, really, the idea that like she wouldn't be able to scrub pots and pans, I'm like, I'm guessing it works pretty much the same. Or like to
Fairy pots can't be that much harder to clean.
Right.
Fairy gardens can't be that much harder to weed.
Anyway,
Tamlin, come on.
So and it's so interesting that this is set in the midst of this kind of like, oh my gosh, they had this deep connection. We have this huge breakthrough with our character, and then she just takes this hit. And like there was just like a part of me,
not even a hit at all to her. It's just a
she didn't even see it.
Yeah.
She didn't even see it. Gosh, and that's tucked right into then, talking about the gallery and her being so happy, and gosh, yeah, I don't know. That whole section just stood out to me. I'm like, oh my goodness, just all of this like really, really great things, and then here's this thing tucked in the middle that she can't see.
Yep, she doesn't see it. But what I like is that she does she starts to believe him that he actually, because he says, he's telling her when he can take her to see the gallery. And he says, please, it would be my pleasure. And I believed him that it would. That's huge for her, that she believes that it would be a pleasure for him to take her to the gallery. So
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah, so there's
hindrance.
some shifts.
The hindrance line didn't even register at all.
And then we have
Oh,
have this last little moment
he
here.
smiled at me still, broadly and without restraint or hesitation. Isaac had never smiled at me like that. Isaac had never made my breath catch just a little bit. Oh, the breath catch. The feeling was startling enough that I walked out, grasping the crumpled paper in my pocket as if doing so could somehow keep that answering smile from tugging on my lips. Feyre wants to smile. Oh my goodness, it's so good.
Oh, such a fun little moment here.
Finally.
We're starting to shift into some of the stuff for those of us who, yeah, sometimes with books like this, like when I know it's gonna be romance, I'm like, can we get through this setup and get to? And I'm like, oh, we're starting. Okay, we're starting. We're almost there. We're starting to see. There was a look. There was a
catch of a
shift.
breath.
There was a thing. We're
She wants to
moving
smile.
into some of that stuff, and I cannot wait.
That was chapter 16.
Freudian slip.
Isaac.
What is that called? Freudian slip. 16.
All right. Thank you for joining us here on the Court of Transformation and Awakening for chapter 16. It's been a pleasure having you here, and we would love to also have you join us in our little community space at ACOTAR. That's ACOTAA.circle.so, where we post the podcasts and have comment space for you to share it. And then we also, share your thoughts on it. And then we also have like fan chats, and then we have whole community adventures that we do together. And we have other stuff that we don't even know is going to happen yet because we haven't come up with it yet because we're making this up as we go along.
Which
right?
I think is the fun thing. It's like, hey, like just come hang out. It's just like regular life. I was just thinking the other day about I was in a conversation. Gosh, look at this. We're in the middle of an ending, and I just still have to say something.
This is
But
real life.
This is
It's
real life.
not black and
we're,
white.
We're
It's
like
not an ending. It's
we're like you're
gray.
having like you hang out with somebody, and you have an idea of how it's supposed to go,
Yeah.
and how much that can like rob the joy out of a conversation when it's like, oh, it's supposed to be deep, or it's supposed to be light, or it's supposed to be whatever, instead of just letting it be what it is. I feel like we're kind of like we're letting it be what it is. Yes. And part of that has to do with who joins us and what shifts. And rather than trying to predetermine everything that's going to happen, we're giving ourselves the freedom to live into all of this. Mm-hmm. And so really it's like, hey, do you want on for that journey?
Yeah.
Do you want to be part of that ride?
Want to see what happens?
Do you want to come hang out with,
know what's
do you want
gonna
to come hang
happen.
out with a bunch of people? Because it's going to be super fun. And we don't even know what it's all going to be, because what it's going to be in a year is different than what it is now. So
It's going to be so
the
different.
earlier you join, the more you get to be there for the whole ride.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So come join us.
Woohoo!
All right.
Sorry, Chris. He's going to hate that on the sound. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching.